Good afternoon. My name is Siobhan O'Brien, and I am an Alumni Relations Officer here at McGill. Before we get started with today's webinar, I would like to cover a couple of housekeeping points. To ensure the best connection, it can be helpful to close other applications on your device. By default, attendee microphones are set to mute and webcams are off. If you wish to communicate directly with the organizers or the panelists of this webinar, either for a technical concern or to pose a question, please use the questions dialog box in the dashboard on the right of your screen. You will find this under questions or on the right of your screen or at the bottom if you're on mobile. We'll be posing a couple of questions to the audience during the presentation using the poll feature. We'll start with our first one now. While you are answering that, I will introduce today's panelists. First up, we have Dr. Dana Carsley. Dr. Carsley is the Associate Director of Resilience and Wellness Enhancement at McGill. She completed her PhD in Human Development at McGill University in the Faculty of Education, Department of Education and Counseling Psychology, and currently works as a course lecturer in that department as well. She is a Tomlinson Scholar and recipient of the Joseph Armand Boisvaudier Canada Graduate Doctoral Scholarship from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Dana has worked as a teacher and special needs tutor for students at all levels. Her research and practice focuses on classroom and universal interventions to promote mental health, specifically teacher-led mindfulness, stress management, and wellness and resiliency programs. Her commitment to enhancing student and staff well-being has resulted in 11 publications related to mental health and education and 30+ presentations at academic and practitioner conferences and community outreach workshops. Our second panelist today is Dr. Nasreen Khatri. Dr. Khatri is a registered clinical psychologist, gerontologist, neuroscientist, and educator with over 15 years of professional experience. Currently, she is at the Rotman Research Institute, Baycrest, University of Toronto, where she innovates non-drug treatments for depression and anxiety. She has completed over 400 presentations, serves as a mental health advisor with Bell Let's Talk, Girls E-Mentorship, the Women's Brain Health Initiative, and the Jane Goodall Institute, and has been cited by CBC, CTV, the Globe and Mail, the Wall Street Journal, and 20 other media outlets. She's also a proud McGill alumna and currently serves as a vice chair of the McGill Women Leadership and Philanthropy Group in Toronto. Before we get started, let's quickly review our poll results. It looks like we are pretty evenly split between tips on how to keep myself motivated and coping with missed milestones. Thank you for participating in the poll. There will be a couple more over the course of the presentation. A final reminder that you can submit your questions for the panelists via the question box at any time during the presentation. There's a dedicated time for questions reserved at the end of the talk. Now it is my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Dr. Carsley.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so hopefully it will. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Student Wellness Hub here at McGill, as well as some of just the services that we're offering in general, but also specifically at this time and resources that are available to students, but also to alumni as well. And I'll highlight what's accessible to who throughout. So first, it's important to acknowledge where the Wellness Hub falls within student services. So hold on one second. I don't think, just want to make sure, okay, there we go. So wellness is a pretty broad term, and there are many components to wellness, as you can see here in our wellness wheel. So neglecting one of the areas may compromise your ability to confront challenges in life, but taking care of one area of wellness will also help them all. For example, if you care for your mental health by taking time for yourself and having that balance between work and home life, that can also benefit your academic health and help you to be a better student. Wellness is pretty holistic, and at Student Services, we try to work together so that all the different areas of your wellness are addressed. The hub is technically one centralized location that tackles multiple areas of student wellness through a student-centered approach. Starting to move toward greater wellness in your life doesn't need to be instantly life-changing and revolutionary. It really starts with small steps and a little bit of introspection and self-awareness. So you can see you have all of Student Services here for you, but now let's take a little time to look at the Wellness Hub. So what is the Hub? Well, the Hub includes supports and resources to help students meet their wellness needs. But who works there? Well, we have doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, counselors, and so much more. The Hub really takes, as you can see here, a collaborative care approach that is goal-oriented. What does that mean? Well, our healthcare professionals work with students to explore various services to find the best kind of care for their needs. So this could mean using one or multiple treatment options, both traditional and holistic. The focus is on awareness, prevention, and early intervention. So at its core, collaborative care is about creating a flexible, holistic model of care informed by mental health research. So students coming through the Hub will be connected to the most effective resources to improve their well-being, whether it's therapy, off-campus resources, peer support, and more, really whatever their goal may be. Now, where do we find the Hub? Well, in whatever our reality is right now, we're not using our physical location, but it is an integration of student health services, counseling services, and psychiatric services in that one centralized location. So it's essentially a one-stop shop service area for students with expanded capacity for physical or mental health concerns. So when we would actually go to the physical location, you can see it's located right here on our map, and it's in the Brown Student Services building on the 3rd floor. Now, just to clarify, all of our services are free to full-time and part-time students who have paid their student services fee and are covered by insurance. The only important part when you're a student is to remember to bring your McGill ID and your up-to-date insurance card. So that's generally how the Hub functions. But over the past little while, we have moved our services from the physical space to a virtual Hub. During this period in particular, we do have many resources available for both current students as well as alumni. And the best place you can go to for the most up-to-date information are the following two websites. So mcgill.ca/wellness-hub or mcgill.ca/COVID support. And we're going to walk through what those look like right now. And we're constantly updating these sites. So if you went to mcgill.ca/wellness-hub, you could check out the general virtual hub page, and there's a calendar, as you can see here, that's consistently being updated with all of our programming. So workshops, groups, and more. And we'll take a look at specifically what those would look like. So if you went to this page and clicked on the calendar just at the bottom, it would take you to the mcgill.ca/COVID support page, which would have a list of all the different programming, resources, services that we have that are basically accessible to almost anybody, students and alumni, but there are some restrictions which I'll go over. So some of our offerings that are available to anybody include Zen and 10. So every day at noon, we have mindfulness meditation or a relaxation exercise that are delivered by our local wellness advisors at the Hub that anybody can access through the McGill Student Services Facebook page. So you don't need to be a student to access this page. You can just go to the Facebook page. So really all you would need is a Facebook account, and these are available. And if you missed the 12 o'clock session, like the one that's going on right now, it's still uploaded there, so you could check them out later and go find the ones that you like. This is a really great resource that we're continuing to have over the next couple of weeks for sure, and then likely when we update our programming as well. Another great resource that we have that's available to everybody right now, so students and alumni, is the Art Hive Live. The McGill Art Hive Live initiative is also on Facebook Live, but it's on the McGill Art Hive Facebook Live but you can find it through the student services one because we promote it there as well. And those are live art sessions facilitated by our artists in residence that anyone can access. And these are offered 3 times a week, so Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. Really great for families as well for art activities. And similar to the Zen and Tens, these are offered live, but then you can rewatch them later if you miss the time or if you want to pause and follow along. Another offering that we have that's available to everybody are the COVID-19 virtual information sessions. These are facilitated by our nurses from the Student Wellness Hub, and they're sharing the most up-to-date information from a health perspective. So not necessarily an emotional support, but just kind of what's going on in the news, and you can access it, the physical health information from our nurses. This is available through a webinar format, and the next ones that we have coming are Thursday, May 14th and 28th. We actually have one there's Thursday as well, it's just the time is a little bit different. But if you go to, again, mcgill.ca/COVID support, that's where you can find that information about where and how you can access it. And this is also available to everyone. Now, if you are a current student at McGill, you can register for any of the workshops that are being offered, as well as some of the groups that we have. So for instance, we're offering Managing Stress in Uncertain Times. So that was a workshop that was created in this time period with tips and techniques for how you can manage stress during uncertain times such as this one. In addition to that, we also have a COVID-19 emotional support group if you're a student that you can attend, which is facilitated by our local wellness advisors as well. We also have a yoga for stress and anxiety workshop that if you're a student you can access, which is delivered by one of our counselors, as well as mindfulness-based stress management for students and also for staff that are going on over the next month. If it has not been updated on the website yet, it will be in the coming days because the entire month of May programming is currently being updated. But I know that for a fact that these are going to be offered. So I would encourage you to keep checking to see what's being offered because the frequency might change over time and we're consistently updating the information. So I kind of want to throw out a little poll here before we go to the next slide. I kind of showed you how we like some of the offerings that we have, but I'd also love to know how you would like to receive programming, just how you'd like to receive wellness programming. So we've been using Zoom, Facebook Live, but then there's also Instagram Live and TikTok. So we can take a couple of minutes to just fill that out. Okay, I wonder if everyone has had a chance to fill it out. Maybe we can see what the results are. So this could just help us inform the type of programming that we would like to offer. Okay, Zoom, Facebook Live, Instagram. So this is pretty consistent with what we've been doing right now. So that's very helpful. Thank you so much for filling that out. Okay, great. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So these are all the workshops and programs that were being offered, but I also want to highlight something else that we have. If you go to the mcgill.ca/COVID support or just the general hub page, there is this yellow bar at the top that has basically any up-to-date information that we have. And this gray tab here, the support off campus, is something that's accessible to everybody. So students, alumni, and even if you just want to share it with others as well. This is a resource page that's consistently being updated with resources available to anyone and everyone. So we have ones that are COVID specific. So as you can see here, the 10% Happier podcast has a lot of episodes that we're making. It's not that we're making them available, but we want to make sure that you're aware of what they are. There's also mindfulness recommendations. There's fitness ones, recommended readings, and so much more. And this page, as I said, is consistently being updated as we see new articles or apps or resources that would be helpful for you as you navigate this challenging time. And I just want to draw your attention to one more thing. Although this isn't the focus of today's webinar, I just want to highlight that if you are a current student and that you do require support, I highly recommend that you check out this webpage over here, so mcgill.ca, and then you can see at the top it has all the words that go along with that. But also, if you just go to the McGill Wellness Hub page, and then you click on the little area that says access virtual services, it will lead you there. And this is all our current offerings that we've moved online, what we have. So for example, if you need a physical health appointment, you can call and get a telephone appointment with a nurse, for instance. If you're a student and you require follow-up for counseling, you can make an appointment with a counselor, and so on. So you can just kind of see how things are being offered, and we're using the service therapist assisted online, so you can get those appointments with counselors as well. So that's what we have going on at the hub. And I just want to throw out one more poll right here, because this can help us also to determine what we would like to do going forward. So some of our sessions are pre-recorded and some of them are live. So going forward, I'd love to get your thoughts on how you would like to receive wellness programming, if you prefer live sessions or pre-recorded sessions. Okay, and we can get, okay, so it's pretty split down the middle. So some are live, some are pre-recorded. A lot of, as you saw, some of the programming that we're doing, even if it's live, you can catch it later, but then some workshops we have are live. And I would say that that's about it. So thank you for listening, and I know we'll take questions at the end, and I'll hand it over back to the team.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carsley. That was very, very useful. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Khatri. And before we do that, we just have one final poll for you. So if you can just take a minute to fill this out, and then Dr. Khatri will come on. We've had about half of you answered. Just give it another 5 or 10 seconds. I promise it's not being graded. Wonderful. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, and I will now turn the presentation over to Dr. Khatri.
Thank you, Siobhan. Thanks so much, Dr. Carsley. That was a great introduction to what's happening at the McGill Wellness Hub. And hello to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the content of what mental health is composed of, and kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about mental health during COVID-19. So obviously a very unprecedented and difficult time for everyone. And so I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that everybody is finding it tough in one way or another. And obviously today we're talking about life being interrupted. But again, I think the emphasis that we want to portray here is that things are interrupted, but they're not canceled. And so we want to build hope and resilience and talk about how we can do those things. But first, let's talk a little bit about mental health. And so, you know, there's all kinds of attendees to this webinar today, but a lot of folks are actually, you know, students and younger people. And we know that anxiety and depression rates are on the rise for that population between 15 and 30 for lots of different reasons. But that's kind of exacerbated by things like the pandemic and COVID-19 and the social isolation, different things that happen because of that. But even normally, we have to learn to think of mental health as being on a continuum, which is what we're on. So we're all on a continuum of mental health. It's not sort of like a switch that goes on or off, that people are either well or unwell. But let's kind of break that down and talk about how many people are experiencing something more. So the question I often get is, what is mental illness anyways? How would I know if I had something that I should see the doctor about? So maybe let me take a couple of minutes and break that down for you. So all mental disorders are really just two things. The first is that the person is experiencing subjective distress. So they feel low, they feel anxious, they feel angry, lonely too much of the time. And the second part is that it's impacting their functioning in two or more areas of life, like work, school, relationships. So that's when you need to sort of start thinking about it. So let me give you an example. Like, for example, what is the doctor looking for, or a mental health professional, if they're doing an assessment for depression? So depression is actually, 3 baskets of symptoms that make up a disorder of clinical depression. So the first basket is the stereotypical I feel depressed or I feel low. So it's the emotional or affective symptoms. So again, feeling low, feeling down on yourself, those kinds of things. The second basket of symptoms are physical. So having changes in sleep, appetite, and energy. So that means that you either feel that you can't sleep or you need to sleep all the time, you can't eat, or you gain weight without trying, and that there's changes in energy. Either you feel you have no energy, or you feel like you're kind of driven by a motor in an sort of uncomfortable way. And then the third group of symptoms are cognitive, which means that you have difficulty paying attention, concentrating, making daily decisions. So if you've been having those kind of 3 baskets of symptoms, maybe not all of them, but about half of them, for 2 weeks or more, it's a really good idea to see your doctor or mental health professional and get that checkup from the neck up, because we don't see ourselves the way that others see us or that professionals see us when we're kind of struggling. So that's important. When it comes to anxiety, the difference between clinical anxiety, I like to say, and regular anxiety or nervousness is, for example, if a door slammed quickly behind me right now, I would startle. My cortisol or my stress hormone would go up. My testosterone, which both men and women have, would go down, and my heart rate would go up. And then within a few minutes, it would calm down again. So the difference between that response and someone who has clinical anxiety is that it doesn't go back down. So if let's say an anxiety disorder is between 0 and 100 is, 100 would give you 100 units of anxiety would give you, diagnosable for an anxiety disorder. What happens is that when people are clinically anxious, they're always already at 50 or 70. So the water is almost boiling, and it doesn't take much for them to get sort of clinically anxious and remain that way. And again, it impacts your ability to function. Everybody feels down sometimes. Everybody is struggling with what's happening with COVID because something is canceled in their lives or interrupted. So not canceled for good, but things like trips, things about work, things about childcare, things about school. So it's important to just acknowledge that we're all in this together. I think that one of the most insidious things about mental health issues is that it tells you that you're no good or that you're alone, and there's something about you. So I just want to say, please, the number one thing is we are definitely all in this together, which I can really appreciate is kind of cold comfort to people who feel that they're going to be missing milestones or have. So we actually have a word for that, or a term, and that's called anticipatory grief. So it's the feeling that you've lost something that you even haven't had yet. So the idea that there could be a graduation, a celebration, a placement, anything that students would experience. Same thing, vacations, seeing your friends. And so that's not pleasant or really healthy for anybody, but to know that, and we'll talk about that, and hopefully during the Q&A, Dr. Carsley and I can talk about resources and ideas that we have between the two of us about what we can do to cope and how we can adapt. So I think the key really is adaptation, because before you know it, and I know it doesn't feel like that way now, because it certainly doesn't feel like that way for me and my family and colleagues, is that it's going to be over before you know it, and we're going to go back to reintegration and face-to-face contact and jobs and school and what have you. So we want to be able to hold steady and be able to do things that are healthy now. And so I think the main things about this kind of anticipatory grief or missed milestones is a couple of things. One is to acknowledge it, to not try to, pretend to yourself or others that it's not happening. The second one is to talk to someone. It can be somebody professionally, but it can also be somebody that you trust, a friend, a parent, a sibling, relative, anyone, and kind of just talk about your feelings. It's really important to share your experiences and to reach out socially and stay connected. And I think that the other thing is to remember that it's an interruption. Again, it's not a cancellation. So there's nothing wrong with planning how you will experience these milestones when they happen, because the advantage is it's not a very small, I wouldn't say it's an advantage in the sense that we don't want others to suffer, but this is the first time that something has happened globally like this. It's not a specific group of people or a country or a culture that's experiencing the pandemic, it's everybody. And so surely when you get back with the people you've missed milestones with, you will be able to celebrate at that time. So it's important to sort of dream, plan, write down your thoughts and feelings about what you may want to do in terms of those milestones. I think the next kind of aspect that I want to talk about before we open up for Q&A is, how can you stay motivated? Easy to say, hard to do, just sort of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, I have sort of specific things that I've done and that we do as clinical psychologists to help the people we work with along when they kind of feel a bit stuck. So one thing is to keep structure and routine. It keeps us motivated because we kind of know what we're doing next. So getting up at the same time, sleeping at the same time, getting showered, getting ready, and then doing, let's say that you would have been doing some kind of research or something as a research assistant. Let's just use that as an example this summer. You can still be learning online. You can still be learning at home. You can still be doing things that are in that area. So I think that keeps you motivated. So that's one thing, it's a structure. The second one, I think, is just being able to have small goals, even goals for the day. And what kinds of goals should these be? They should be, very specific. So I'm going to go for a walk twice a day, or I'm going to do some yoga once a day, whatever it may be. It should be doable, specific, and measurable, so that you know that you did it. Yes, I did yoga once a day, whether you enjoyed it or not, or felt that it was, the kind of workout you usually would have had. It's still really, really important. So it's important to have those goals kind of broken down. And then the next thing is to be able to reward yourself in a healthy way. So whether it's going to be a healthy snack, or whether it's going to be listening to a song and taking a break, or calling a friend. So that's kind of leading to my next sort of way of staying motivated, is kind of having a buddy system or somebody you check in with, whether you're texting, FaceTiming, Skyping, Zooming as we are now. It's really, it's a pleasure and it's an honor to be able to meet with you all, even virtually at this time when we need to kind of share our ideas and really come together. So though we all are feeling more isolated, and that's natural, it's also natural to seek out companionship in new ways then, if we can't do it the way that we did it before. It's also important to have good sleep. So we know that during a pandemic, we sleep differently and not as well. And one of the reasons for that is when we're isolated, human beings, again, their stress hormones go up because when it's not by choice, it's a feeling of being under siege. So even though you may be at home in a let's say in a very ideal situation with your family and have everything that you need, when you go to sleep at night, it's still kind of the body knows that you haven't been able to leave the home or not leave the home in the usual ways. So our physiological alarms are still ringing even though we are completely safe. So what can help with sleep? So things, again, like sleeping at the same time, getting up at the same time, doing some exercise and eating well to keep our energy levels organized. And another thing you may want to do is some relaxation during the day, which can be anything. It can be anything from meditation to yoga to listening to music to reading, drawing, journaling. All of these things help us stay on track. And finally, I just want to say that it's really, really important to not sort of deny yourself health care because of the pandemic. It's not to say, even though the health practitioners and mental health practitioners are working in different ways, and some of them are virtual, don't hesitate. Don't neglect your mental or physical health if you feel that you're struggling to the point, like I talked about earlier, where you have those symptoms for weeks or a couple of weeks or more, and you feel like, you know, you want to know what's going on. It's really important to get that checkup from the neck up. It's important if you have some kind of physical health problem or a chronic problem, for example, diabetes, anything like that. You need to stay on top of your medical care because that really helps your mood and it helps you with your motivation. And so even I think the most difficult part is the uncertainty, is that we can kind of get through almost anything, I think, as human beings, as long as we know it's going to end. Well, we know this is going to end, but we just don't know when. So it's important to be able to plan positively and realistically for the future that is most definitely coming. And at the same time, learn to kind of build a little bit of resilience through structure, accepting a little bit of sort of grief and the feeling of being thwarted that we all do about certain things that we're not able to do right now. But also, I think, lastly, to be grateful that we're in Canada, we're in a place where, as Dr. Carsley mentioned, there's really comprehensive health care at McGill and other places in Montreal and around the country. And if we do need help, we can get help. And so it's important to be able to reach out, and it's important to be grateful for the relationships we have, for the country we live in, for, you know, being at a great institution. And you know, better days are definitely ahead. So I wish everybody to stay safe and really great health. And really thank you for joining us today. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Siobhan, and we're going to get to what you really wanted to know today and get to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khatri, Dr. Carsley. That was very informative. So definitely to the attendees, please put your questions in the dashboard on the right-hand side, and we'll pass those over to the presenters. We haven't had any come in yet, so don't hesitate. You can definitely go ahead and do that. I would actually just like to follow up on something, Dr. Carsley, you mentioned at the end of your presentation that talking about the virtual care services that are offered, I would anticipate in a time like this that you've probably seen an uptick in the number of requests that are put on that service, and just wanted to sort of find out if students are not able to get an appointment at the moment with a counselor, maybe what other resources exist.
Thanks, Siobhan. That's a great question. So if you are a student at McGill, then there are resources available beyond just meeting with a counselor one-on-one like we would typically have. One of it is a partnership that we have with Keep Me Safe. So Keep Me Safe is an app that you can download where you have access to counselors basically with a pretty quick turnaround related to any mental health needs, and you can have, you know, a virtual conversation by video chat, a telephone conversation, or an actual chat. So that's a really great resource that we have. In terms of physical health appointments, if you are an international student covered by Blue Cross, then you have access to Maple, which is basically the same thing as Keep Me Safe, but for physical health, where you can meet with a doctor or physician, anything related to your physical health online through video or phone. And if you aren't an international student covered by Blue Cross and you just need to access physical health and you're not able to physically leave where you are, you can pay a fee for it. And I would encourage you to go check it out, but it's something that is available when, you know, we can't actually go to the physical places that we normally would. In the actual hub, we do have, for physical health, you're welcome to contact the hub and schedule, as I said earlier, a telephone appointment with the nurse who is able to help. They're pretty accessible right now. And I would say if you need an appointment, now's a good time. And also with our local wellness advisors. They're going to begin taking in students shortly as well. And as I said, follow-up appointments with the counselor is something that we have through therapist assisted online as well.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm seeing a few more questions come in, so I'm just going to address them kind of as they do. One of them was, I think maybe more for you, Dr. Khatri, but could be for both, is sort of a question, maybe a bit more discussion about how to stay motivated when the future is unknown. You kind of mentioned it, like we know that it will end, but just sort of the challenge of keeping it, of staying motivated when everything is just so up in the air.
Sure. So maybe I'll start us off, and Dr. Carsley, if you want to jump in at any point. So let me pick up on that idea of ambiguity. So generally speaking, what happens in the brain and the mind and the body is when there's uncertainty, as humans, we tend to slow down or stop, because that to us is a sign of from an evolutionary perspective, there could be a predator, there could be a danger, so we shouldn't move too quickly. But we don't want to become sort of paralyzed in any way about that. So making decisions in the absence of certainty is what we all do all the time, but we have enough control of our lives, especially living here in North America, that we're used to being able to do things and be able to guess at the outcome. So here, I think what I would suggest that people do is, let's take the academic example, is, when will university start up again, and different things like that. So I think do what you can do where you are, and that will do a few things. The first thing is that it'll distract you. You'll actually be working on something. It'll bring your anxiety down, and you'll be focused on something else other than your anxious thoughts. So it's important, because usually when we're talking about mental health, when we're concerned about the future, we're anxious. When we're regretful about the past, we're a little bit more depressed or down. So we're all more anxious than we would be during the situation. There was a poll by Angus Reid that was on CBC News yesterday, telling us that 50% of Canadians feel that their mental health has suffered since the start of the pandemic. So it's just sort of a natural phenomenon. But to work against it, we have to introduce structure where none exists. And so this is kind of what I was trying to get at earlier. Real structure, like what are you going to do with your day? Lower our expectations. So no, it's not like getting through a lot of activities and accomplishments, which I know McGill students are used to experiencing in their lives. It is a very, a special group of individuals who have achieved a lot already. And so we're not asking you to put that on the back burner. We're just saying, what could you be doing now? So learning online. If you were going to reach out to professors or do something like that, do it now. If you were going to volunteer, what else can you do to volunteer now? I pick up on volunteering because it's something that's very good for your mental health. It shows that it raises your mood. It makes you feel you've accomplished something in a concrete way. And it actually is helping the effort. So if there's a part, so I'll just here kind of tell a personal story, how I started wanting to do these webinars and help organize them a little bit, is that I was watching the news and, thinking, this is kind of overwhelming. What can I do to help with what I've got? And I thought, well, I'm a clinical psychologist. Maybe this is something I can contribute during this time. And since then, I can tell you, I felt much better than I did before, because it kind of takes away a little bit of the uncertainty. At least I know what I can do to, contribute to the effort. And so that can be as simple as writing letters to people who are in care homes, or something. They have all kinds of things that they're doing virtually, so you can get in touch with organizations that kind of touch your heart, or things that are close to you or even aligned with you academically, and start planning and thinking about the things that you can do, as I said, when everything opens up. So I think that's kind of, I don't know, Dr. Carsley, if you have something you want to add to that.
No, I think you covered it quite thoroughly. And I'd say jump off what you were saying before about the routines, and establishing those intentional routines every day, I think can really make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so to take away the uncertainty, we want to do concrete things and have a routine. And part of it is just sort of accepting it a little bit. And the last part is knowing that it's going to be over.
Wonderful, thank you. Again, for Dr. Katrina, these ones are leaning a little bit more towards medical advice, and I know that you are bound by restrictions on how specific you can get, but I think you can potentially address some of them. Sort of just in general, you talked before in depression about the kind of the buckets of symptoms. One of our attendees is sort of looking for more information about on that continuum, at what point is it too much that they need to seek, that they should be seeking medical attention? So how do you distinguish between what is just natural, I guess, feelings of lowness or, like you said, disruptions in sleep or that sort of thing caused by the situation we're in right now? And at what point does it tip over into something that maybe needs medical attention?
Right. So, the idea of when does sort of mood become a disorder? And so essentially, it's kind of what I said earlier, but I'm happy to sort of break that down maybe even a little further, which is that anything where you're feeling subjective distress, so that could be anxiety, anger, loneliness, depression, those kinds of feelings that are more or less, present a lot of the time, every day, more days than not, most of the day, for about, 2, 3, 4 weeks or more, then it's best to kind of have contact with your doctor and find out more about where you stand. So as a clinical psychologist, I mean, you see sort of yourself and the people you know, we see sort of a larger group of people in terms of the continuum of mental health. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here and we're waiting for people that we know, because we're prepared for this, that during the pandemic, people are going to have more disruptions in mood and in functioning. So essentially the two factors are that you don't feel like your usual self and it's impacting your functioning. Now, the other part of it is to say, well, isn't everyone's functioning impacted because they can't do the things they used to do? True, but it doesn't mean that everybody will fall into having a clinical disorder. So I don't want to pathologize what we're all going through, because it is a kind of a collective crisis. But I think what we all want to do today is, for everyone who's involved in this conversation, in this webinar, is that we want all of us to stay well and kind of get through this as best as we can. I will say something else too that I neglected to mention earlier, which is that you need to be aware of the news, but you don't need to be overwhelmed by it. So I would say that in an era or in a time when we have a 24/7 news cycle, that is really not your problem. I mean, it's important to be an informed citizen, but think about limiting your access to news to what you need to run your family or run your life or whatever it may be, and not get too caught up in it. I know it's very compelling. I know it's very dramatic and tragic in some ways, but nonetheless, we need to all sort of stay afloat. So I'll give you an example of what I do. Is that I like to get the news sort of by audio. I find that that's the most informative. I can take it in. We all learn differently. And I don't find it too disruptive, as opposed to getting the image of the news and watching it on television or online, if you know what I mean. So seeing it and hearing it. Some people like to read the news. Some people like to watch the headlines with the sound off, because you can see the headlines at the bottom. So try and pick a way of learning about world events that fits your learning style, but also your emotional style, so that you don't become overwhelmed, so that, if there's younger people around, I mean, it's a mix of attendees today again, so that children don't get overwhelmed, but for all of us, because it hits us at a very visceral and physiological level, and then takes a while to calm down, and you could have just been doing something else that would have been more productive, probably.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Carsley, you were talking a bit before about some of the resources, but given your own background, can you maybe share some of the things that you personally are doing to help keep a healthy mindset during this time?
Absolutely. So my background and my research is in mindfulness-based interventions, but mindfulness for a universal design. So essentially, stuff that is more accessible, simple, and doesn't require as much training. So I think stuff that lends itself to people who maybe think that they wouldn't necessarily be into it. And I find that that really helps me throughout this process. So on that resource page that I shared earlier, if you go to mcgill.ca/COVID support, we have a bunch of different mindfulness apps that are available. And a lot of the ones that we recommended have a lot of free components, especially during this time. So I never had to pay for anything on these, just for promotional purposes. I haven't had to, but also just I was able to access so much free material. And I find those meditations and practices are really helpful, and especially if you do just brief ones here and there. So I'm not suggesting that you do 20-40 minutes each session, but finding time to do a 5-minute here or a 3-minute there, I find really helpful. Earlier, Dr. Khatri said about, doing yoga. For example, I start my day every day with either yoga or some type of exercise, and I find that routine of knowing that's the first thing I do when I get up in the morning. It takes a lot less time than if I were to typically go to the gym. So, looking at the benefits in that. Another thing that I do every day is practice gratitude. So I have this great app on my phone called the Gratitude app, and I get a reminder at 5 p.m. every day. What are 3 good things that happened today? And I write them down, and I find that was something I did before, but then I got the app, I'd say in January, February, and I started doing it. And those reminders were actually really helpful because you can always find 3 good things in your day, and it helps you to remember to feel gratitude and not always focus on the negative, because our brains are predisposed to that negativity bias, and I would think even more so during this time. So lots of little things, and I'd say when I highlighted it, it's lots of little things. It's not something that's really changing up my schedule too much. I'm not trying to carve out time in a busy schedule or an unpredictable schedule sometimes, but it's making sure to have those little bursts of things that I enjoy and remind me to be mindful and present for the moment that we're in.
Great, thank you. We actually had someone just commenting. Thank you so much for sharing. What was the name of that gratitude app? Is it just called Gratitude app, or?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just called Gratitude. It's like pink with a little design on the front, or pinkish yellow. Yeah, it should be the first one when you type it in, I think.
Wonderful, thank you. This one I'll pose to both of you. I think it's kind of interesting when people are on here, learning for themselves, certainly. But someone has posed the question of, how do you kind of take these strategies that may be working for you, and how do you support or mentor someone else into taking these steps themselves? Maybe you're seeing a colleague or a sibling or a child or a parent or someone struggling. How can you support or mentor them towards some of these strategies?
I'm happy to start off, if that's okay. Just to build off what I was saying before, looking at it as not this long thing that you have to do that's like a whole change in your life, and making it part of your day rather than another thing that you feel like you need to do, I think is really, really helpful. Also, if you approach it kind of like this buffet of activities, and that's something that I usually use when talking about mindfulness, it's not just one way of doing it. There's so many different ways that you can do it, and so many different resources, like I've highlighted a bit before, that you can access to do it. I find that's really helpful, and kind of accepting that if this one doesn't work for you, maybe you can try another, and I think that that's okay.
Right. Right. And I mean, I think the same thing, that everybody is different and going to have a different experience with trying. It's easier to get someone to do something than to stop doing something. So I think if you're trying to mentor someone or kind of nudge them into a healthier direction, either it's something you can suggest and say that, this is something we can try together, or this is something that's worked for me. But I think, as Dr. Carsley says, you also want to send the message that, don't give up, because there's going to be lots of different things that won't take much time or money or effort that are going to be useful. I also want to make just a general kind of statement, which is that it's okay to rest. I think that this one thing about this time, let me put it this way. If I was you, if I were the attendees who are missing milestones or having these experiences where they're not in school where they would have been or something, it's okay to take some time to reflect on the way things have been and how, and I'll give a specific example of social relationships. If you feel that you wished you had more connections or different kind of connections, it's a good time to kind of write those things down and reflect so that you can have a bit of a reset time now. And then when things open up, you can use that time. So one thing about life is that it doesn't stop, but when it stops, you get this kind of disaster. So instead of it making it that way, see it as an opportunity and spend some time reflecting and resting. We don't really have much respect for wakeful resting in Western society. And so I really like Dr. Carsley's ideas about having apps that remind you whether it's about gratitude or starting the day, meeting the day with yoga or mindfulness. Certainly not a expert on this as I think you are, but I do innovate non-drug treatments for depression, anxiety, and especially for older adults. And one of those is mindfulness. And when I first started doing research in this area, a friend of mine said, you know, I think this is going to be really good for you to do mindfulness research. And I said, why do you say that? And she said, well, I think you could just, you know, use a little help staying in the moment or being in the moment. To which my response was, I'm always in the moment, just not this one. And I think that a lot of people can kind of relate to that we're busy going into the future and there's nothing wrong with slowing down. You're not wasting time, you're being productive by being reflective and restful.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I did just want to follow up on that one with one other question with regards to the role. Our intended audience for today is mostly graduating seniors, young alumni. What role would you say that parents play in this whole mental health support? So whether it's the young adults leaning on their parents, what role, what support can maybe they ask from their parents? What role do parents play, do you think?
Dr. Carsley, would you like to start? Okay. So, I mean, the first thing I think is that we're in a uncharted territory, as everyone is saying, and so there's no really right or wrong answer. So I think it's important to keep the lines of communication open. So to make this a little more specific of a discussion, let's say that you're the parent of somebody who is going to be graduating from McGill and is not having that celebration right now and is not maybe getting the placement or internship or job, or, that they can't begin it. And so things are up in the air. But again, I think that support needs to be something that you can offer in a gentle way, oftentimes just by asking whether you can have that conversation and saying, look, I know this is a difficult time, acknowledging your own anxiety for them and acknowledging their anxiety and just having a dialogue about what they think would be helpful right now. So you don't have to kind of plan for all of life at the moment. Again, I think we just want to get a little bit of a roadmap about what we're going to be doing today, next week, a couple of weeks from now. In what way can your adult child, who let's say is back at home and has graduated, be working towards or planning towards a future that is most definitely a bright future that is going to come, and at the same time be contributing to the household, being contributing to the kind of general health and dynamic of the family. Because we have to be sensitive both ways. Both parents and adult children are kind of really disjointed by not having this milestone happen. The milestone isn't just graduation, it's also being launched. And launching is often an ambivalent process. Yes, everybody wants to be independent and be on their own at that point, but they're also new at it. They don't, maybe their confidence isn't so high. And so it's the chance to build resiliency. The message you want to give your adult children is not that they're vulnerable and helpless and you have to, do everything for them, nor is it that it's going to be so easy. It's that whatever it is, they're going to be able to meet that challenge. So we want to build high support with medium expectation. And that's kind of it. So again, easier to say and hard to do, but just keeping that in mind and knowing that so many parents are in the same situation. Call each other, find out what works, what doesn't. You know, we have a 12-year-old son at home, and I'm talking to the other moms, you know, often about how homeschooling is going, what works, what's, you know, how can my son connect with his friends, all those kinds of things. And so it's a great time to reach out, even if we can't be there in person.
Wonderful, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left. I think we've covered most of the questions that have come in. Now's your last chance if you have one that's sort of been burning or a follow-up to something that has been shared. Otherwise, let's give it a second, see if anybody types something in. Just the one last thing I wanted to just sort of maybe reiterate and say, Dr. Khatri, you were talking before. I love that expression, the checkup from the neck up. And I know that you touched on it briefly at the end of your presentation, but just to kind of maybe reiterate about making sure that we're taking care of the neck down as well in terms of physical health and how important that is, the role of exercise. And not being afraid to seek out medical attention, whether it's a cut finger or a chronic condition or whatever it is, to make sure that that's being taken care of.
That's right. And so thank you, Siobhan, for kind of ending on this note, which is that health is holistic. It's physical, mental, you know, emotional, cognitive. And so let's not neglect anything. We've been focusing on mental health a lot today, Dr. Carsley and I and Siobhan, but that's not to say that, you know, one doesn't, the mental health affects the physical and the other way around. So again, if you have diabetes or some chronic condition that you need to manage it. Make sure that you reach out to your healthcare providers as you would at any other time. If it's done virtually, that will be just as good. Please don't be afraid that you're going to somehow be infected by COVID-19 or that you don't want to get near a hospital or anything. All you know, precautions have been taken, you know, on your behalf to make sure that healthcare remains safe for all Canadians, and it is. And so please reach out when you need to. Take care, stay safe, and stay healthy.
Wonderful, thank you. We've had two more questions come in that I will post or that I'll get to in just a minute. We will answer both of them if we do go over the time. Bear with us if you're interested in hearing the answers to this. One of them actually touches me personally. I'm feeling this myself. This is a recent graduate talking about anxiety with regards to the reopening of some services and facilities such as daycares and elementary schools, going back to work when asked by an employer, especially if they feel that it's too soon. So we've talked a lot about, you know, this being put on hold at the moment and knowing that things will eventually go back, but maybe just to take a minute or two to talk about managing the going back and the reintegration.
Well, maybe I'll start. I think that the reintegration is going to be another culture shock, right? And I think when it comes to what we're talking about today, mental health, that's when we're going to start to see some of the effects that we're not seeing beforehand, because people are kind of in crisis mode and just sort of doing what they need to do, and also because people are in social isolation. So we're not seeing how other people are doing this pandemic. And when we all meet again, so maybe just taking the very specific example of elementary schools, I think we need to trust public health and the government in terms of when in Canada we're going to be opening up. But I think if anyone has concerns, they should talk to their healthcare professional. They should talk to their employer if they have concerns. They should talk to the teachers. And it's okay. It's okay to seem nervous or want to get information, because our children are precious. We don't want to, you know, we'd put ourselves in harm's way before we would put them there. And so there's nothing wrong with being uptight about it, or whatever you want to call it. I think if you have questions, you need them answered, because one way or the other, that anxiety is going to be transmitted to your children, and it's going to make them feel not sure about their reintegration. So I think we all, the more comfortable we are, the more comfortable our children will be. So if you feel like you don't have the full answer, make every attempt to get that answer.
Wonderful, thank you. And then the last question that has come in with regards to summer placement. So given that university students are likely not able to work their typical summer jobs this summer, do you have any suggestions for for productive experiences?
Dr. Carsley?
Just to clarify, for productive experiences for pay or for?
It's not specific in the question that was put forward, so I'll leave it to your discretion.
Sure. So I would recommend, a lot of universities have made courses available online for free. And I did one of them actually. For example, Yale has the Science of Wellbeing, which was their most popular course. And I have to say, very timely. So it was, in terms of the content, it's really transferable to right now, but also just a great learning experience that's easy to do at your own leisure. And there's other ones that are available from many other institutions as well on Coursera. So those, I think, are really great ways to kind of keep your brain stimulated, but also to help you in this time. But also, so you can do a course that's completely unrelated to anything to do with your mental health and well-being, which are accessible as well. So yes, that would be my answer to that question.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, definitely. I guess to just keep looking for options. There are definitely some places that are hiring for workers. So yeah, and I guess to share. Ask your colleagues, ask your peers what they're up to. We've reached the end of our topic, the end of our time together today. So I just want to thank you both, Dr. Carsley, Dr. Khatri, very, very much. Thank you to all the attendees for being here and for participating in our polls and asking questions. We will go through, if there were any questions that we missed, I'll review those with the panelists, and we'll get some answers to you if we didn't cover them on the panel. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.